But in the face of low inflation coupled with the Samsung Note 7 fiasco and a string of labor union strikes challenging growth, expectations are mounting for more rate cuts down the road. However, some experts are calling for a fundamentally different approach. Take a look. Weak investment, stagnant productivity, and lukewarm business and household confidence. These elements that characterize the trend of low growth continue to weigh down governments and especially central banks, pushing them to pump more money into their economies. Korea's central bank is not a stranger to loose monetary policies. The key rate stands at a record low, and it's still under mounting pressure to dive even deeper. But Robert Barro, professor of economics at Harvard University, considered one of the founders of new classical macroeconomics, says the focus has to shift.
I think the Bank of Korea, along with other central banks, has made the nominal interest rate that they control too low, kind of artificially low. And it's a strange kind of policy that you haven't seen before the Great Recession period 2008-9. So I think Korea, along with other central banks, should be moving toward raising nominal rates back toward a more normal range, maybe 3 to 4%. A gradual policy of doing that, pre-announced, would be the best way of doing it. And if the U.S. were to do that, it would be easier for South Korea to follow that. Maybe the Bank of Korea could take the lead instead of waiting for the bigger countries like the U.S. to take an appropriate action. So that would be more daring because it's a smaller economy taking the lead.
Exactly. Do you think that is feasible?
I think it could be feasible, but the details have to be thought out more carefully. I mean, I'm making a suggestion. Maybe you could not wait for the United States.
So would that mean Korea also does not have room for more fiscal stimulus? Barro says.
Fiscal discipline is still important. I mean, Korea has room to spend more money from the public sector, but if to the extent that you do that, you want to focus on projects that are actually productive. So some infrastructure investments can be reasonable, and one can use fiscal capacity to fund that in terms of maybe borrowing to do certain kinds of projects. But one shouldn't do it for its own sake, and one shouldn't do it in terms of demand stimulus. I think you have to emphasize productivity.
Korea also faces longer-term issues like the aging population. What should the government do to raise its growth potential?
Well, flexibility in the labor market is important. So you don't want to have regulations that inhibit firms moving around labor in terms of hiring and firing, for example. Population growth, of course, is very low now in Korea, which is also a standard part of the growth process. Fertility rates are extremely low. I don't think that's necessarily a negative. Some people have argued that the government should be doing all kinds of things to counter the declining trend in fertility. There are a lot of things you can do to subsidize basically people having children in terms of making it easier to have child care services or educational services. And I don't think that that's a central part of a development strategy. And I think mostly fertility reflects choices that people make, particularly in the context of more women working full-time in the labor market, and I don't regard that as a negative. It's partly reflective of people just getting richer, better education.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Professor.
Thank you.